Hello and welcome to Get a Better Handle on Life. I'm Barry Winbolt and this is my podcast. In each episode, I try to deliver expert insights, practical advice and real-life examples to help you get a better handle on your life. Some of this comes from me and some from the inspiring people I'm in conversation with. In this episode, I'm talking to Rachel Stone, who's recently published a book on leadership. But that's incidental to the things that she has to say about the importance of leadership in our world today and how any of us can develop those skills, whatever our role in life or work. I'll come back to Rachel's book later in the conversation, and as she said, it'll be of interest to anybody who wants to change things. For now, let's think about leadership. We tend to think of leadership as applying to high-powered business executives and the business world in general, but in fact it applies far more widely than that. Leadership skills are probably something that most of us could use at some point in our lives. It's not only about business. Today I'm in conversation with Rachel Stone, who is an expert on leadership. But Rachel, hello, first of all.
Hello, Barry. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I believe you have a particular take on leadership. Tell me in a nutshell why we should talk about leadership.
At the moment, there is a number of crises that the world is living under. From my understanding, what that requires is excellent leadership on all fronts. And I feel that the best way to effect change is through the utilisation of excellent coaching skills. You can add a level of dynamism to your leadership if you are able to use coaching skills to move people forward. And that's exactly what we need right now in the world generally.
Let's stick to business for the moment. What does leadership in business mean?
For me, it's always meant lifting people up so that the people that you work with can be their best self and deliver their best work and contribute. And they can only do that if the leader that's leading them is also doing that, being their best self and having their best intentions to get the best out of other people.
Okay, excellent. And that's kind of what it says on the tin. But what does it mean? What does best self mean, for example, in a leader?
In a leader, it's not about effectively what you do. It's the fact that you have an impact on the work of other people. The leader is the person that enables the other people to move forward because they have a shared sense of vision, a shared set of values. They share the same passion. And the leader isn't telling people what to do. It's enabling them to contribute in their best way possible. And in order for that to happen, you have to be a certain type of leader.
Okay, let's come back to a certain type of leader in a bit. At the moment, you work in the business arena. I have done for many years. And to somebody listening to this who isn't already engaged in this notion of leadership or coaching or the coaching leader, I want to keep them listening. And I think we have to move beyond the language of the labels and what it says on the tin, as I've called it, into how does that manifest itself? If I go into a workplace and let's say I am doing a day's consultancy work for somebody, and this person is an excellent leader, how will I experience that relationship that will engage me in a way that I am likely to give my best?
That's a great question. It's like you're asking me what manifests itself. What can you see? What can you hear? What do you experience when someone's been a great leader? And often it's much less about the leader and much more about how they enable other people to interact. So what you will hear is lots of great questions from the leader. And if you can imagine a thinking bubble, not above the leader's head, but I'll put my hand on top of my head, but the leader enables the thinking to take place in the person that they're talking to. So that person then is able to respond with their best thinking skills because the leader has asked great questions. And more importantly than that, they're an expert listener. So they seek first to understand what's going on and then to be understood. So they start with the other person first and they lead by giving space to the other person.
Thank you very much for that. You've just shone a light on something for me, because seek first to understand. Yes, always standard communication for me in that, so I need to find out who this other person is. But to put it in my language, my jargon, start where the other person is. So if you're my leader, you need to start with what's going on in my mind.
Absolutely.
Even to the point of, was I stressed as I came through the door? Am I available to hear you? Is this the right time to have this initial negotiation? Or would it be better if I just had 5 minutes to chill with a cup of coffee? And then a good leader will intuit that so that the audience, as I call it, the individual, in this case, my case, if it was us, is in the best place to actually hear the leader and to interact with the leader.
I really love that because it's starting with awareness of self, understand and have awareness of your own self first. And then a great leader will have great awareness of others. They will know their team. They will get to know them if they don't know them. And they will have a great awareness of their strengths and weaknesses, if we call them weaknesses. And so therefore it starts with this awareness. Where am I at as the leader? Am I in the right place? Am I got my best thinking on? And then where is the other person? And it's understanding that the most effective species are the ones that can adapt best. And therefore the most effective leaders are the ones that can adapt best. So I know if I'm a leader, I know myself. I completely understand where I tend to operate with my traits. And I have to then realise, in order for the other person to be at their best, I've got to operate in a way that understands them.
So for you, being a good leader starts with self-awareness, with self-understanding, knowing yourself.
Absolutely. And if a leader understands their own traits and which ones are strongest under which circumstances, and then they can adapt those traits because they understand the language that will help the other person with their dominant traits. So it's no point having a one-size-fits-all communication style. As an effective leader, you understand yourself, you understand the other person, you adapt your communication that enables the other person to hear you properly, and then you listen in a way that enables you to respond appropriately.
Yes, to the circumstance in that moment. There's a lot in what you've just said.
And I think this ingredient is quite often missed out. People say, oh, you have to take me as you find me. I'm this kind of leader. Well, a one-size-fits-all doesn't compute if you want to extract the most effective interaction between two human beings. It's about adapting.
And to start at the end, when I've heard in organisations, you take me as you find me, I mentally write the person off because actually I think it's a real cop-out. I think it's very lazy thinking, and it's very often precedes some sort of excuse for offending people.
Absolutely. It's a bit like when people say with respect.
Yes.
You know totally in that moment they're going to disrespect you.
Yeah.
Take me as you find me. I am as I am is basically laziness. It's saying, I'm going to plough through all of your needs, wants and desires and dominate with mine, which actually is a lack of respect, but it's also ineffective. It's a closed mindset. And therefore, that person in this day and age especially is not going to be an effective leader.
No, and it points to, from a communications perspective, I'm trying to be polite here, but points to a deficit in that individual. I'm hardly likely to judge that individual as being worth my time because they're probably not going to be, they're not self-aware enough, basically. Anybody who's going to trot out a phrase like that, except a little bit lightheartedly maybe, has probably got some work to do, basically, is what I'm saying.
I think that's true, especially when we look at the world of work now, with engagement levels at an all-time low. Since 1945, engagement has been measured as the lowest it's ever been since 1945. And any leaders who think that they can barge their way through by instilling engagement because they've got this one-size-fits-all approach, I'm afraid it's a recipe for disaster. The new generation coming up are very aware of what gets the best out of them, and they do expect it and they do demand it. They want to be treated in a way that gets the best out of them. And take it or leave it. If we don't change as leaders, if we don't adapt to this new way of thinking around how you get the best out of somebody, I'm afraid it's a recipe for less engagement, not more.
Coming back to, I want to ask what engagement is. Every time you bring up one of these words, I want to know more about it. No, well, it's not so much that. I'm thinking from the listener's perspective and thinking, well, okay, but what does engagement mean? You know, because these are all abstract terms. These are all high-level terms which mean different things to different people. And we have to chunk down and sort of discuss what is meant by engagement. But I'll put that on aside for a moment because I come back to this notion of call me a cynic, but... And you know a challenge is coming, don't you, at that point? So maybe I shouldn't say that. But seriously, you must struggle with some types of leaders who just don't get it. And I suppose what's going through my mind is the people who ask for your help in honing their leadership style are already on the journey, otherwise they wouldn't be asking. This is my thinking. The people who really need it are perhaps going to be a tougher call in terms of the sort of work they need to do as an individual on themselves in order to be open to the ideas you're putting forward. What do you think about that, about two types?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because I was in a training session with a board of directors and they've had these challenges around recruitment. They've got people in at the bottom of their business in terms of trying to train people in this quite scientific-based industry. It's manufacturing industry. And, there are 2 or 3 people in the room who do understand the kind of things we've just talked about, and a couple in there that didn't. They got more of a scientific approach to life because they are engineers. And they were saying there is a gap. There is a gap between what I expect from somebody when they come to work and what they will provide. He said, I don't know what to do about it. I expect them to come to work in a certain way. And I said, let's look at the factors that you can control and the factors that you can't control, the knowns and the unknowns. We know that there has been a shift in how people feel about work, and we know that the recruitment market is tough. What can your company do to ensure that you've got the best people in the right roles to get the right results for you? Is it that you can deny the fact that people coming to apply for jobs and they're working in an environment where they can give their best if they're treated appropriately? Is it that you can change that whole of society? You can change those young people, or is it that you can change yourself? And what would be the most effective way to bring about the result that you need to push your business forward? Because I've got a feeling that it's up to you as the leader to get the best out of that person. You can demand it and you can expect it, but I always say expectations are the seat of all unhappiness. It's about what you can influence and change and what you can't. You will have to be different if you want to attract the best recruits. And if your approach is that you're not going to change, you're just going to keep on demanding the same thing, I wish you luck with that.
Yes, so know thyself. We have to start with ourselves when we want to bring the best out of other people. And as I've always said in my work on difficult people and that area of human relations, we should not assume that the person you are, in this case, leading, knows how to do what you are expecting of them, particularly if you're the leader. You've been around the houses, you've been around the block, you've got experience. They're new in the job or new in the company or new in the role. That it is your job to make sure that they may be adequately technically qualified for the role, but there may be other things that they need to do in order to be able to speak the same language with you and have a shared vision with you. And one of the things that I've seen, to my horror, and going back a few years now, was the poor level of induction processes and onboarding processes in organizations. It's such a variable thing. People will come into an organization, into a new job, and they'll be sort of delegated to somebody to show them around, and that somebody very often doesn't know their job or doesn't know who they'll be interacting with. It's a very mixed bag, isn't it?
Although I totally agree with you, but I do think that the emphasis on having a good start has improved, because it is now so difficult to get the right response when you put out an advertisement for a job vacancy. you're just so grateful that people have applied. And therefore, when people do apply and you have got to that point when they need an induction, it would be very short-sighted of companies to not provide the best start possible, because one, the expense of recruitment has really magnified, and therefore, you want to get a good start going. I think way back about 15 years ago, induction was a real luxury. Now it's an absolute necessity, and companies, I think, are learning that it is an important part of hit the ground running. If you, as I always say, slow is fast with people. The slower you are at the beginning by giving them a fabulous induction, the sooner they can get started working effectively. If you rush through and get them to start first, they're going to not become effective until much further down the line. So it's an upfront investment of time, and the quality of the induction, even though it might take time and feel like one of those things that you haven't got time for, it certainly reaps its rewards sooner than if you don't do it properly, trying to skimp on it, and then you end up having an ineffective employee for a longer period of time.
Yes, well, again, it comes back to awareness on the part of the leaders or whoever is putting together this induction process, doesn't it? Because, what is an induction process? If it is just showing somebody round, which it has been in the past on occasions, that isn't an induction. So again, it comes back to the wisdom and the insight of the people in charge, doesn't it?
And I think also lots of people now, especially since COVID, are more interested in the meaning and purpose of their role, and understanding what value they add and how they contribute to a bigger picture has become much more significant. It used to be that, you just went to work for a means to an end. And I don't think that's the case anymore. Far more people, there are different portions of society that, money is just a means to an end, but there are a lot more people, even younger than it was before, that want to come to work to contribute something meaningful. And therefore, they want to know where they fit into the bigger picture. And especially with remote working in quite a few roles, the showing people around is irrelevant almost. It's the what am I here for? What am I adding value to? How can I get my sense of self from that? I want to go home at the end of the day feeling like I've been a good person and I've done a good thing. What part of my work is going to help me to do that?
Yes. The hierarchical nature of businesses, whatever people say, you can have an excellent leader, but how does it translate into the chain of command? Because somebody can be the most brilliant leader, but by the time those messages are filtered down to possibly through 5, 6, 7 layers even, and you've mentioned remotely as well, it comes very much down to a kind of a bottom-up principle too, doesn't it? Supervisor, manager, and going up the hierarchy as well. You can have a super bright, switched-on, capable leader, but they must surely have to build like-minded people around them to make sure that they're leading, because they're not leading individuals at that point, are they? They're leading the organisation. How does that work?
Well, what I would say is over time, organisations have become flatter, which has its advantages and disadvantages. So you might get less exposure with somebody because their span of control is much wider, but the relationship between you and them is much closer in terms of the impact between the two. So as things have got wider, which comes with advantages and disadvantages. So the tool nature, because that's a way of saving costs, and technology has replaced a lot of things that used to happen manually. So therefore you can have more effective, flatter structures than we could before. But I would just say that the most important thing is it's got to be effective communication, and always less is more. So the real key to the success of this is crafting your message so that it's very, very short. Say more with less.
You're listening to Get a Better Handle on Life. I'm Barry Winbolt, and I'm in conversation with leadership coach Rachel Stone. Coming up, she's going to be talking about developing a leadership culture. Okay, now we're back into the realm of corporate speak a bit, because this sounds grand at a consultancy level. But if I'm a leader and I then say to some of my reports what you've just said, minimal messages, make impact, hasten slowly, all of these things, be patient, coach your people. How do I get them to do that?
Well, I think they need training.
Okay.
Because it's not given. Some people are naturally that way inclined, and I would always advocate training because that's how I make my living. But I would just say it's so important. You can't assume these skills. So if somebody's promoted to a more managerial role, they may have technical expertise, and their role may never have included communication on a big scale. So they move away.
No, I quite agree with that. But what's behind my question is precisely that. I've been involved in training for years, and I became almost anti-training at the end because I thought this is a waste of time. So many organisations get people like me, like you, in to do training, but that's almost a dereliction of duty in that they should be role modelling the behaviour, and the corporate enterprise should be living the values in such a way that people pick it up by osmosis. Don't expect the trainer to do it all alone. I'm not saying we shouldn't have training. I'm saying that
I totally hear you. If it's a bolt-on tick box exercise, well, you've had your training, you should be able to get on now. That's totally not the right way forward. And I tend.
But isn't most training that?
Well,
I mean, isn't most training that somebody somewhere hires somebody to come in and do the job? I mean, bearing in mind, I did this for 30 years, and some organisations are named, the Isle of Man government, for example, were very precise in what they wanted. They were very hands-on. They were very involved at all levels. Others, I didn't see anybody as the trainer. I very often didn't even see the person who'd hired me to do the job. I pitch up in a room with a bunch of people. Now, I suppose what I'm looking for here is not just to be negative or destructive, but to say, what do organisations, what does you've got some great leaders out there, but it won't happen just because they trust it's going to happen.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. It's about developing a culture, and the culture needs to be one of coaching and learning. And that really does start at the top. And I'm very reticent to work with an organisation that won't let me at the board of directors, or it won't let me at the senior leadership team, because otherwise I would feel terrible taking their money, because it's just money for old rope in a way. It's a tick box exercise that's not going to create any results. And I also know that I can prove the return on investment, provided they work the way that I recommend, which is to diagnose the issue with scientific diagnosis, look at the reports, look at the weaknesses and the challenges, look at where the best use of everybody's time is and what are the issues that you can fix, and then run the program involving everybody, and then re-diagnose afterwards with my measuring tool that I've become accredited in, and then say, look, you've moved from here to here. You can see the return on your investment. If people won't engage in that manner, then I don't really want to work with them, because I'm not about wasting people's money. And in actual fact, on one occasion, I did work with an organisation, and I could see that the way they were working, really what I was doing was effectively wasting their money, and I knew they needed to work on something else. And I just said, can I give you your money back? I want to step away, because I felt like a fraud. There would be no impact if the people involved were not fully behind the programme. It's not about fixing people. It's about creating the right culture. And the culture is that of learning.
Yeah, that's the magic word, really, as far as I'm concerned, when you mention culture, because obviously if we move into the culture of into an organisation with an identifiable culture and norms and values, we are more likely to pick those up by osmosis, and then training can reinforce that. And the company lives the values, and the leader actually is an expression of that and a role model for that at the same time. So, and taking a programmed approach, as you've suggested, obviously is far more powerful than just coming in and doing a day's training, that sort of thing.
I mean, a sticking plaster doesn't solve the root cause. And I think sometimes if people are looking, billions of pounds are spent in this industry with no true net benefit, because if that's the case, all the spend that's been happening in the last 10 years, well, why is engagement so low? If effective leadership and training and coaching has been happening, why is engagement so low? It's obviously not happening. So therefore, we've got to look at what the root cause is. It's probably because a lot of trainers and coaches, although they're very good at what they do, they're not using scientific evidence to say, this is how we can move things forward. They're just saying, let me deliver the program I've got, which is not really solving anything. It's about the diagnosis before and then the evidence after that you've moved on. And if you can't, we've really got to look at, that money could be best used somewhere else if it's not being used to create an impact. And there's a difference between skills and attitude. And I would say the attitude is part of the culture. I'm not against bolt-on training courses to learn a new technical skill, but what I'm saying about building a culture, that is all about attitude, and that does come from the top.
Yes, yeah. And what does engagement mean in terms of employee engagement? I touched on this earlier. So can you just explain what engagement means?
I think you can always tell what engagement is if there's no leader present, is the activity being done with enthusiasm and spirit? Or is it that the work only gets done when someone's there monitoring and supervising and controlling? So an engaged organisation, there's a lot of these out now that understand motivation, and especially in America, they understand motivation. They know what it takes to give people autonomy. They give people the framework within which to work. They set out a standard. They don't necessarily say how to do something, but they say what you need to do and by when. And they give people the autonomy and they give them the support and resources they need in order to be effective. And I mean, there's quite a number of organisations cited in the book Drive, and I can't remember the name of the author. But
the author's Daniel Pink. I'll put it in the episode notes.
It's a very good book about motivation. And what they say is you've got 20% of the time to do whatever you want with the budget, whatever you need, in order to be creative and autonomous. And companies like Google, other technical companies have discovered that when you give people that autonomy, it's like motivation 3.0. He refers to it in that book. You give them that autonomy, they're engaged because they believe in the mission, they believe in the vision, they're totally inspired to share this experience, and they just get on and do the work. So in my understanding of the term engagement, it's what happens when the leader's not there, and it's what the spirit, there's a difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And there's a difference between when someone comes to work to do a job or comes to work to give their self to contribute. And I think that's what engagement is.
Yes, thank you. That's very clear. And I can think immediately of examples of that. I've stayed in a lot of hotels, and there's a clear difference between engaged staff in hotels and those who aren't. For example, I was in one hotel, and it also happened to me recently in a cafe I was in with somebody who was clearly new. I used to go there often, and I knew the staff. And the moment I asked for something, there was a can-do attitude, basically, is what I'm saying. I felt that the staff were engaged and knew what they could do. So I'd walk into a place, and depending on the reaction I got from the staff, I would know whether they're engaged or not engaged.
And sometimes you can see it in someone's face.
Yes, you can, but also that they are empowered to be more specific. I went into a hotel and I said to somebody who happened to have a uniform who was walking past me, so they obviously belonged to the organisation, but what I was asking for wasn't their role at all. They were going to do something else. I probably shouldn't have interrupted them, but they said straight away, "I'll get onto that straight away, sir. If you just sit down here, I'll be back in 5 minutes." They took time out of their day to sort out whatever it was I was asking for. They came back with the answer, problem solved. Whereas another place, the next day I could go into another hotel and they'd say, "Oh, you need to ask reception." That, for me, is the difference. It's being engaged to a point where I can help you because I know what this organisation is about. I know my place in it, but I don't have to. It's not limited to that place in it if I can help in this instance.
Absolutely. It's about that sense of purpose that, customers basically are important, but they obviously themselves feel valued as an employee equally, so that there's not a disparity between you matter more than I do. It's that if I look after you, then I will get looked after. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, Richard Branson is famous by saying, look after your staff first and then look after your customers. I don't know how true it is. I've got no evidence to back that up, but it's one of the things that he's become famous for. Who's the most important people in the organisation? It's the staff. And then however you treat your staff and the way that there's that sense of community there, that will reflect in the way that they look after the customers. And I think you can always tell in an organisation what the staff facilities are like, and therefore that then reflects on how those people then feel they will treat the guests, or especially in a hotel.
Absolutely. I'm speaking to Rachel Stone about leadership. Rachel, this has been a fascinating conversation. You've recently published a book. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, it's coming out at the end of June this year, and I've spent a lot of time investing in my personal development because of the industry that I'm in. And I had not a really great start in the world as a kid, and was called upon to become the main financial provider for my family. Although at the time, it's the furthest thing I wanted for myself and for my children. And at that moment of calling, if you like, my husband was unwell, and I really had to step up. And I didn't think I was worthy and I didn't think I was capable, but I went on a journey, and it's a bit of a cliche to say that, but I literally did. And I realised that there is such a lot of significance around self-worth, and I think especially in the workplace, as a human driver to be heard and understood. And I think if leaders really understood that, they'd solve a lot of problems and prevent a lot of problems. But so what I decided to do this year, I had a bit of a personal trauma with my own children, and it was devastating. And I couldn't actually work. I was a bit depressed. I was in grief, in actual fact. So I thought, what can I do? I can't work because I can't go out and be my excellent self if I'm not in this state. So I thought, I know, why don't I write down what I've learned? And I've learned a considerable amount, I've realised. So the first part of the book is about me getting to that point from the age of 5 to the age of 30, everything that happened in order to form me as a person, and then what I decided to do and how I tackled that. And then from the second part of the book is basically my learning journey, everything up to that point, well, not absolutely everything, but all the ingredients around transformational leadership and everything that goes with that. So solving conflicts, learning coaching skills, listening skills, what's the difference between leadership and management? Because I really felt that I want other people to realise that they can also transform themselves to become a more effective leader, even if they feel like they haven't got it. I definitely didn't feel I had much to offer, but when I was 15, 17, 20, 30, I didn't feel I had anything to offer. But in actual fact, I had to step up. And I think this world now requires people to step up. And I thought, well, this could be a bit of a guide. I mean, if I can do it, literally anybody can. So I feel that all my learning is in there. It's book one, because I think there's more to come. But I feel that it was such a blessing in a way to have that time to consider what have I learned and how can I share that with people? And that's really what the book's about. And it's called Spend Time With Me. And it's a story to inspire transformational leaders. And the whole purpose of it was I kept looking in my life for other people to want to spend time with me. But in actual fact, what I needed to was to value myself. And I think that's a message that needs to go out in the world at the moment, that, unless you can work out your own self-worth, other people won't believe in you until you believe in yourself. And I think that hopefully this book can help people to do that.
Well, that echoes one of my mantras, which is, the journey, the things we most need help with, or the things we think we most need help with in life, in moments of pain, are the things we can only do for ourselves. So
Totally hear that. I totally hear that. And
we're speaking about leaders as though this only applies in business, but every one of us in some form will be a role model for others at some point in our lives, voluntarily or otherwise. We may not even, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years. A large proportion of them never realised early in their lives that they had influence, that they had impact, that they were actually role modelling. And if for nobody else, we're bringing up our kids if we have children, or if we're teaching, or if we're a leader of a youth group. And I suppose that's one of the questions that's been at the back of my mind all through this conversation, which is, it's fine knowing what you know and explaining it very eloquently, but how do we show people that they can do it. And it sounds as if that's really part of what your book is about. Is that correct?
That was my purpose, really. I think that there will have to be change in the way that we live as humans. And you have to start with yourself. And I can't profess that I've been a great parent, but I've always tried my best. So it's not a parenting book, but I do think it might be helpful for people to understand that there are behaviours in your life which can be more helpful than certain other behaviours. And so it does capture that. So it will be of interest to people who are not necessarily business leaders. I think it will be interest to people who want to slightly change things about how they live their life and change the results that they get in their life. You know, how you behave, the responsibility is with you.
Absolutely.
And if you're not getting the response you want. So, that's been a learning journey as well.
What you're echoing too is something I heard when I wrote the book Difficult People years ago. One of the consistent pieces of feedback I heard, it was written about difficult behaviour in the workplace. One of the consistent pieces of feedback I've had throughout the years, for many, many years now, is I didn't realise that I bought this because of my work, but it's improved my home relationships as well.
Fantastic.
Because you can't do one without the other. It's about personal growth and development. And as you so rightly say, it starts with us. And, well, that's... Shall we leave it there for today?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure we'll come back to this topic. You've given me a lot to think about.
Oh,
I'll put the title of the book in the episode notes. So for now, Rachel Stone, I'd just like to say thank you so much for your time. It's been really enlightening.
Thank you so much, Barry. I love talking with you, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. All the best.
Thank you. Bye now.
I always find my guests engaging and inspirational. And I hope you found this conversation with Rachel Stone informative and useful. If you did, please like, share or comment. My thanks to Rachel, and I'll put the details of her book in the episode notes. You'll find more from me and the topics I cover on my blog at barrywinbolt.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn, on my website and on YouTube. And remember, we're all on a journey, and it's never too late to get a better handle on life. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe so you can join me next time. Until then, this is me, Barry Winbolt, saying all the best and goodbye for now.